Welcome, viewers or listeners, however you're viewing this, to Assiduous Dust, home of the OTSCP. I hope you had a happy new year and enjoyed the holidays. It is now 2021, and this is season 2, a brand new season of Assiduous Dust. And I have with us for episode 1, I have with us today the amazing Kim Dower. I am so excited to get on. What I am going to do is I'm going to look at my cheat sheet right now. I have a cheat sheet. Shh, don't tell Kim. Kim Dower is the city, served as the City Poet Laureate of West Hollywood from October 2016 to October 2018. She should serve more, and I should follow a petition, and you should too. And originally from New York City, has published 4 collections of poetry: Air Kissing on Mars, her first, sensual and evocative, seamlessly combining humor and heartache as told by Los Angeles Times, which was chosen as one of the few poetry books to be honored in the state of California, and is on display at the Governor's Mansion. And then Slice of Moon, Yummy Yummy, is unexpected and sublime as told by O Magazine. Lost Train to the Missing Planet says Kim's poems speak about the gray space between tragedy and tenderness, memory and loss. Oh, just lovely. Fragility and perseverance, as said by Richard Blanco. And Sunbathing on Tyrone Power's grave, which won the Gold Ippy, I hope that I'm saying that right, Ippy Award, Ippy Award, for the Gold Ippy Award for Best Poetry from an Indie Press in 2019. I had the honor of seeing Kim read that in person, and so that was pre-pandemic, by the way. Kim's poems are included in several anthologies, so many, too many to name, but most notably Wide Awake, Poets of Los Angeles and Beyond, which is published with Beyond Baroque Books, which is part of the Pacific Coast Poetry series. She teaches workshops for Antioch University, UCLA Writers Extension, and the West Hollywood Library. Everyone listening or watching, please give a big round of applause for Kim.
Thank you, Josh. That's a lovely introduction. And it's great to be here with you, zooming our Saturday afternoon into the sky together.
Oh, that's lovely. That's going to be the name of a poem, Zooming Our Saturday Afternoon into the Sky. That's got it. Maybe that'll be for the poem for the OTSCP at the end, but we'll see. It's got to be spontaneous. Okay.
It's all yours. Yeah.
Of the title? Oh no, I usually like the guests to kind of create the title, but anyhow, right. I like that one. Regardless, I select that. Okay, if I remember. Sometimes I don't even remember who I am, but I remember who you are, and Kim, it's an honor to have you here with us. And so I'm curious, is there something with that you haven't done? Like there's a silly and then kind of a serious thing with regard to poetry. So 2 different things. Like some people have said in the past, for their serious of like, writing in a garden, that they recently did. Melissa Studdard did that for a previous episode for the closer for that. We had someone who said for their silly was, I've never, written a poem while skydiving. I don't know. I wouldn't do that. I guess that's their silly. Is there something that you haven't done with poetry or as an event, an activity? The silly and serious go.
Well, I have written a poem while skydiving, and it wasn't silly. I almost died doing it. No, it's all silly. I think poetry, as serious as it can be, and of course, it's a serious craft, as we all know, but you need to sit down feeling a little silly, no matter where you're writing it,
Hmm.
because it's a joyful, playful occupation, really. That may sound odd, but I've written poems everywhere. I guess the silliest place would be in my car parked in Target parking lot. I mean, that's pretty silly. I've pulled over a lot of poems in my car. Uh, I don't
Hmm.
think writing a poem in the garden is that silly, really. It sounds very
That was
silly.
that was the
Oh,
serious.
that was serious.
Yes.
That was serious.
But
Well,
by
I
the
mean,
way, this is you're coming from Los Angeles, I'm in LA too. And so it makes sense to be writing poems in the car. It's like half the
yes.
time you're spent in the car.
Absolutely. I write and I write down things when they come to me, and they'll come to me whenever they do. I don't beckon them, they just sort of find me. A poem finds me more than I find it, actually.
Hmm.
So, uh, I don't know. It's an interesting question. But I don't think there's anything silly or serious about where you write it or how you write it.
It just is what it sounds like you're
It
saying.
just is, it just
Hmm.
is.
And
It can be after seeing something silly, for sure, or
okay.
hearing a silly conversation. Um,
Okay. Well,
you
maybe
know,
then after this you've got to then write your own poem afterwards, because this is definitely silly and all jokes. Um,
yeah.
so I'm curious. What you mentioned about poems kind of coming to you, and I've experienced for myself. People talk about the muse, and the muse is I have a love-hate relationship with the muse. Let's say, sometimes I say, the muse is a cruel temptress, and man, I want to go and do something else, but no, I gotta write some stuff because it's coming to me and I gotta just jot it down. Or let's say I'm with my parents, so I gotta jot it down, and mom's upset. Why are you writing poetry? Listen to me. Or let's say you want to write about something, but it's like you don't want to force it, and so something's not necessarily coming. So my question, and this is a big kind of multi-part question, is with different aspects in your career, what has been your relationship with the muse? Particularly, let's talk about with your books that of poetry. Kind of how has it shifted or changed, maybe in between or during the process? And maybe if you could paint us a picture so that we could join you along the way, um, that would be super helpful and groovy.
All right. Well, let me try to answer that for you.
Yeah.
So I started writing poetry very young, as a child, as so many of us do, writing, jotting little things down in a notebook. And we didn't know about a muse at that time. It was just a little flitter in our tummies, that was like, write that down. And, I would force my dolls to listen to my little poems and little stories. And then, of course, like all of us, if you're good at something and you get attention for it at school, that kind of helps you along. By the same token, if you're ignored for it, you kind of lose it by the wayside. And my drawing and painting was never really taken very seriously. But if I wrote something, suddenly people got excited. So I feel like that was helped along. And I, loved writing. And I went to college and I fell in love with it more, with wonderful teachers and creative writing teachers. And I taught it right after I graduated.
Any particular professors or
Yes, well, I
that?
had great Thomas Lux, who passed away a few years ago, tragically. He was my very first poetry teacher, and that's a gift from the heavens right there, because he makes you fall in love with poetry. He declares you a poet. So at 17 or 18, that was it. I was done for life. I was told, there you are, you're a poet. Here's your your diploma as of being a poet, and so you begin,
Sayonara.
sayonara, bye. So you begin to see the world as a poet. And what does that even mean? It just means that
Right.
maybe you see things that other people don't see, or maybe what you're describing, the muse, maybe there'll be a moment in the day or something that you see on the sidewalk, or a snail or a bird or
The way the
someone.
sunlight catches your eye as it kind of like peers in as you're waking up in the morning through like the curtains,
Yeah,
let's say. Yeah.
right.
That
And
specific, that little unnoticed whatever.
whatever grabs you, whatever is an emotional grab, which is what it is. So there you are. But I will tell you, and your viewers or listeners, that for a big chunk of time, I left the East Coast. I came out to Los Angeles, and for, I would say, 20 years, I did not write poetry.
That's a long time.
Yeah, now let's see, am I telling the truth there? I would say, yeah, I would say probably 15, 20 years. I had notebooks and I'd write things down, but I really didn't think it wasn't anything that was grabbing me during that time. I wrote other things, and
Like
I,
stories or essays.
stories or things for other people, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and had a business, had a family. But poetry came back, and we could call it the muse. I don't really know, but it was, Tom Lux told me, it was, the Russians call it nightingale fever.
I
Nightingale
love
fever.
that. Nightingale fever.
Nightingale fever. And what it was literally, I was on fire, days, weeks, months, poems were just pouring out.
The muse
As
was
if
binging.
I had never stopped. And it was extraordinary and fun and exciting.
Sounds
And
also a little frustrating too.
it wasn't frustrating,
Oh.
but it was troubling in that I didn't know if what was coming out was decent, or, it had been a while even since I was reading poetry. So I sort of took a crash course. I went backwards. I just dove backwards into that life. And I had all these wonderful books that I've carried with me for years. I did keep buying poetry all through these years, but I was reading. And then Lux also said, you need to go back to a workshop, because you've still got the imagination, you've got the ideas, but you need to get back to the craft. You need to remember what goes into a poem.
Plus,
So
it's also a great place for community. And community, I feel like, is also another fundamental aspect of exposure, not just to people's work, but also them as a person, as well as like the poet beyond.
Absolutely. It was so exciting. It was, I hate to get sort of religious or spiritual, but there was a
No, by all
spirituality.
means. I've had
It
out-of-body
was,
experiences, galore.
okay, well,
So
this was my version of an out-of-body experience. This was the enlightenment for me. This was
Kim's enlightenment, your
yeah,
tell-all.
I was ready to be the poet that I wanted to be at 18, 19, and 20, when I didn't have that much to say. I had a lot of feelings, and I had a lot of desire, but I didn't have a lot to say. And suddenly I had a lot to say. I had lived a life. I
You had
was
all those
married.
years. Yeah.
I had all those years.
Though you're
and
not a
obviously
day
a
over
lot of
30. So, so.
yeah, well, day and a half. But it was fantastic, and it didn't stop. So the 4 books and all the other poems I've written since, that was basically in a 12-year period. So it was a poem or 2 a day. They were not all good, but the work was coming out. And so the muse, I felt, you want to talk about a muse, I was living inside the muse. The muse was carrying me around like in a little pupusa. I was like
kind of like a
inside.
friend in a way. You have a relationship with it, I guess.
Yeah. And I didn't worry that she was going to leave my side, and I still every morning I come into the computer, I get up So 5:30, 6, I start the day with a poem.
And
Or
that's
I
a
go
really
back.
great practice to have. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing that later, how did that come to be? There must be something. I know that this is still following this big long question. But did that shift, that come to be, in the last few years, particularly?
Well, no, actually, when I first contracted nightingale fever,
Mhm.
it would wake me in the night. Uh, a lot of my
Hence Nightingale.
Yes, there you are. Right. A lot of my poems come from dreams in that, well, back then, this hasn't happened for a while, but a dream, I would awaken to an image that I had just had in the dream, and I literally had to write it down. So I would go to my computer and I would, so that in the morning it was waiting for me like a little, like, like what a cat in for you. Like it was my little idea waiting for me. So that's when I got in the habit of writing first thing in the morning, because there was something waiting for me. I feel like even if you're a novelist, no matter what you're writing, if you finish the day before and you leave it open, in the morning it's waiting for you to finish it.
That's
So
sometimes why, for me, I won't. So I cleaned up my space, but I have various spaces. So it's important for me to like have like a mess sometimes, which might be considered a mess. But I like, maybe I have some papers or stuff or loose things, or like I have previous drafts of a piece, but I have it maybe sitting on the couch, or I have like the Word document of something that I saved but didn't close out, because, and a few books out, because that way after I meditate in the morning, I can go back there. And so kind of
yeah,
it's there.
yeah, it's nice. You don't really have writer's block when you're reminded of what you're in the middle of, and it kind of takes you to the next step. So and I guess my meditation is sitting there and writing out some lines. It's quiet, it's just my head,
No
even though
timer,
I'm,
just like whenever it then, yep, that's enough.
yeah, exactly. I work all day. I have a job that I do.
Yeah.
So, but
I-
it's, of
And
course, we're
sleep and
all
then
working.
play until 5:30 a.m. or until 6:30
Yeah.
a.m.
But if a poem comes to me, I will not lose that opportunity, because honestly, if you don't write it down or dictate it, if you don't grab that at that moment, you will lose it. It's not going to come back to you. I've learned.
So, for example, let's say if you're teaching, I guess you're using Zoom now, right? You've been using Zoom, or
Yeah.
so. Let's say you're giving a class, or I should say professing, but let's say you're giving class, and oh shoot, a poem's coming to you. What do you do? Has that happened?
Usually, Josh, I'm sure you know this, but they don't usually come when you're in the middle of talking about something else or engaged that way.
Well, if you're
It's
listening to a student, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
in class
oh
discussion, let's say, and it's like,
yeah, I write it down. There's always a pad and a pen within my reach.
have you ever
Uh,
incorporated that then in the lesson plan, like spontaneously, for something?
no, but I don't teach. I teach infrequently, so I don't teach every day. That's not my full-time job. So I teach these workshops, but there have definitely been times when we do automatic writing in all my classes where I will write something from the moment, spontaneous, from what's the energy in that room. Because as you know, going to workshops and teaching them, there's a lot of really fabulous energy in those creative writing rooms, because they're on fire. There's an excitement.
Mm.
And I'm not talking about quality, good, bad, experienced, non-experienced. None of that matters. What matters is the energy that everyone brings, the expectation of the excitement of poetry. And that in itself can create a poem.
Right, and that's for me why also, I miss the in-person, doing stuff in person,
Yeah.
even though with Zoom you can experience that, but I feel like I need to work a little harder of readying myself for that when that
Mhm.
happens. Um,
Yeah. No, Zoom is difficult. You're looking at, it's like talking to the television. I feel sometimes, my mother would, at the end, she would sit in her apartment and she would talk to the television as if those people were her friends. Like she thought, like Ellen DeGeneres was her friend. So she'd be like, Ellen, really? What are you talking about? And I'd go like, Mom, you don't know Ellen. She's not really a friend.
do you have
But
a poem about that?
on Zoom,
About
yeah, I'm actually I do have one of those. Yeah.
would you be willing to share?
Yeah, I picked out a bunch of poems. I didn't pick out that one, so I don't even remember which book it's in. But I have a lot of poems about my mother, so I'm sure,
Yeah.
but but that's kind of like what Zoom is like, because it feels like you're talking to the TV. I'll
Or
look.
if you happen to, maybe you could cycle back to that one later. Do you
Yeah,
happen to have something that in between, after coming out of from the, when you were embraced by Nightingale Fever, one of the earlier pieces? Do you have?
sure. I'd be happy to read. So this is my first book. It's called on Mars, and it came out in 2010. So a lot of the poems in this book were written 2007, 2008, when
And
I
it
first.
is sensual and evocative, as said, so and seamlessly combining humor and heartache. So if the Los Angeles Times says something is like that, you got to get it for the sensual and evocativeness.
It's very sensual, Josh. Okay, and very
Ooh la
evocative.
la.
So, well,
Okay.
what I did with this book, which I was very proud of, I really enjoyed doing it, and I haven't done it with the others. I broke it into categories, because when I first started writing, I had what I considered to be true stories. And then people give me titles, because when I started again, I would ask people to give me a title, and I would force myself to write a poem based on that title. And then Cranky in Paradise, which are all the poems that you can imagine, just things not going well. And then how to, because I happen to know that how to books really sell well. So I thought I would write some how to poems. So I broke the
that
book
is
into that.
excellent.
But
Yeah.
the very first poem in this book is Mailbox Away. And I think it's the best example. I write a lot of poems about nothing. It's like, remember, the Jerry Seinfeld show? He used to say my show is about
I
nothing.
Yes, I recently I've started watching that again, of the episodes, because I started back on, Christmas for the Jews. Of course, I watched the Festivus one, Festivus for the rest of it. So I'm like, this is a great show. I need to
Yeah,
rewatch this. So
it's a
I'm with
great
you.
show. So I write poems about nothing. And like the muses were discussing, she comes at all times. But there was, when I first started, and it's still the way I write, something hits me and I write about it. And this was in the days when there still were mailbox. Now they're really gone. But there was a mailbox I used to go to all the time on the corner of Cahuenga and Clinton. And I was about to put something in it, and it wasn't there. And I sat down and I wrote this. They took the mailbox away on Cahuenga and Clinton. I know, because I wasn't feeling right. Decided to take a walk, figure things out, remember why I love the clouds. Found my rent check still in my purse, gave me a goal, a project I could complete. But when I got to the corner, it was gone. Just space in the place where the box had been, where I've deposited countless bills, birthday cards, where once I tossed a sticky, half-eaten ice cream dish. There was no garbage can in sight. I gave it some serious thought, but now realize the mess I made. may have destroyed a young girl's last letter to her grandmother, stained a college application. What did admissions people think when it arrived with chocolate sprinkles stuck to the stamps? Worse yet, a love letter someone finally had the guts to send, smeared with butterscotch sauce, possibly obscuring the recipient's address, sender never knowing it was not received. When I saw the empty corner where the mailbox used to be, granted out of place on this isolated street, it hit me. The lives I ruined, the mailman's soiled hands.
Wow, we do a thing here. We do snap, 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 clap, 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 round of applause. You will never, when people say let's give a round of applause, you will never again not think of doing a round of applause. So round of applause. That's a beautiful piece. And I feel like that's also, could you read the last 2-3 lines again, please, for us?
Yes, when I saw the empty corner where the mailbox used to be, granted out of place on that isolated street, it hit me. The lives I ruined, the mailman's soiled hands.
Yes, that's just great. I think it's very also apropos to a lot of the times of events that have happened recently and the troubled times that we have lived in. And hopefully there'll be less of this happening, you know, in the rest of 2021. I pray that is the case, given everything that happened last year with mail and, attacks on the post office. And also like maybe we didn't appreciate it as much, and then things are gone and certain things. So it's like to value also certain ideals and ways of life. And similarly with the pandemic in a way, and it gives you pause. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the poem has life, it lives on because of what you're saying. And the other thing just about poetry to bring up for a moment is, everyone thinks that poems are autobiographical. We write the truth. Well, we lie in our poems just like novelists do. If you write murder,
it's our secret. It's our secret.
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to ask a crime writer or a mystery writer,
did you kill that person?
But for poets, no matter what we write, it's expected that that's something that really happens. So I was once talking about that because when I first read a poem to the audience, somebody actually came over to me and said, it's a really good poem, but I can't believe you put ice cream down a mailbox. They were just,
and obviously it's like, no, wait, did you? Because I didn't think you did.
Yeah. No, I didn't. It's called a poem. You make things up. So the idea.
That would be a good book to write about, by the way, of like the secret lives of the secret lives of poets. All the things, all the lies we told you.
Yeah, I mean, we make things up too. But the thing that they, that the truth of a poem is the
feeling.
Right. The feeling is authentic and true, but not the events. But if it conveys, if it brings a feeling, it doesn't matter really how we get there. And
maybe some events are, but maybe there's, I find for me certain things, like in my first poetry book, like almost like pretty much all of it is true, but sometimes people will interpret it as, let's say, of someone dying, that it was, I'm referring back to me who's died, when it's like, no, there actually was somebody who was just like me in all these ways who died. So people can read in certain things where there aren't,
Well, I say let people read anything in that they want, as long as they get something out of it. This is what we talk about a lot in classes. If you, after we read poems, one of the first questions is, what meanings do you take from the poem? I learned that first in Terry Wolverton's workshop years ago. I thought it was, it's a very valuable lesson and tool, because when you hear the way people interpret your poem or what they think it means, you can decide then and there, well, this is not what I want. I have to work on this because this is not what I want. Or you can say, hey, great. If you take that meaning from this poem, that's fine with me. But
or sometimes it's a better idea and it's like, whoa, never thought of that. And maybe I could go more that way. But it's great when that happens.
exactly. And I'm at the point where when I finish a poem and I know that it's finished, which we all do, we know when something's done, it sort of gets up and walks off the table. It's like, okay, bye. I'll look at it a few weeks later and I'll think, well, some people will think it means this or that. Are you okay with that? Because I kind of know now how people read my work or any work. And I don't really care as long as someone gets something out of it.
And that's great, because that's another thing, and that's part of the secure sauce is to be of service. And if you can be of service through the poem, and it also allows someone to have their own experience. And so are there particular things that I guess you wish, like, I don't know, let's backtrack with your poetry mentor of Lux,
Yeah.
Tom Lux, and so what would you say? Are there certain things that he kind of God rest his soul, taught you, or certain things that you might not have taken, it didn't really kick until later on,
Yeah.
that you'd like to, if you'd like to share of some of his trade secrets, or
Well,
not trade, but you know what I mean.
Lux was a perfectionist in his own work and expected that from other people's work in terms of craft. But the great thing about Tom, one of the great things, is his sense of humor. And he, in his own work, was able to make the most tragic and poignant poem also have humor in it. And I think
Which
one
is
of the
pretty
reasons
tough.
it's very tough. And although for me, I do it in a lot of poems, it sort of comes naturally. I'm lucky. I mean, I see a lot of things as funny or humorous that are not,
Yes.
at all. But
I find that happens, but when I say something and speak something, not in a poem, I just need to translate it that way.
yeah. But I think he was such a good teacher for me because he enjoyed humor and he also enjoyed, imagination. So for Tom, the main thing for Tom was that cliches were the enemy. And I wrote that in my notebook. Cliches
I've
are
been
the
told
enemy.
to avoid them like the plague.
Exactly. So from day one, because I'll never forget, we're going back many, many, many years. You couldn't do that now. I don't want to say how many years, but a lot of them. In the days where you could still smoke in class, and that's probably before you were born, probably, but you could smoke.
Yes, I was born in 93, so.
Oh, well, you couldn't smoke in class then. But anyway, so this was a long time ago, and I remember that somebody brought in a copy of Rod McEwen's. You probably don't even know who that is, but poor Rod McEwen.
Unfortunately, I don't.
Yeah, he wasn't terrible, but it was sort of like Hallmark cards,
Okay.
But this was a college student who thought that these poems were good, and whatever. We all had our taste when we were 17, 18. Anyway, and Tom took the book and threw it across the room and said, "Don't come in this come in this classroom with this book." So that in those days, you could do something like that, but that was still a little crazy. And
yeah, you couldn't do these days. Oh no.
No, you couldn't do that.
Not just because of the pandemic, but also just because yeah.
No, you can't. And he would never do that now. I mean, he's well, of course he's not alive now, but I mean, when he was still teaching.
I'm sorry, that's kind of funny. That's like,
I know. Well, see, he would think that was funny, but later years, he wouldn't do anything like that. But at the beginning, we're all green. But the point is, cliches are the enemy. So if there's anything that's cliche. I get rid of that. It's sort of like you clean the poem. And he used to have the different lenses that you would look at a poem with, the different lenses. So there's the music lens, you read it out loud. Is there music?
The lyrical, that whole
lyrical, the line break, every single thing about obviously every word. And the class that he taught for years at the Palm Beach Poetry Festival that I went to for 10 years in a row, it was called Line by Line, Word by Word. And you literally would go through that poem line by line, word by
and
word.
rip it apart.
It was tedious, and if the word does not belong, get it out. And, and look at the line break.
And you can always save it for something else.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is what reminded me. I mean, I can sit down and do automatic writing and come up with some really fun things.
And you can edit it while you're doing, because you're kind of thinking about that simultaneously somewhat.
Right. But
so you're editing. So you're not actually adding, you're avoiding cliches. If cliches come to mind, it's like, nope. Or similarly, there's the word light that is sometimes used so much. It's like
right. And I just, there were certain things in that first year and the second year with him that stuck with me. And, I remember I once wrote something like Marshmallow Sky, the Marshmallow Sky. And he was like, we will never have Marshmallow Sky in our poems, like that one, So he was funny. I didn't get hurt feelings by that, but I see now as a teacher, sometimes, I couldn't dare. People are very sensitive, and I miss the day. Well, it's nothing to miss because I'm not in
school
anymore,
it's sincere. It's a sincere thing, and that's important.
Yeah, exactly. But now we have to say, there must be another way, another word that we could choose. What were you trying to? Let's talk about.
I have an option. Call on me, Professor.
What's your option?
Okay. No, you could always do, and that's another thing. Like you could do, like you have, instead of marshmallow, you have like a marsh, like a wasteland, and then it's mellow because it's people are calm in the wasteland, and then there's the sky. So maybe if there's a way then to connect that, instead of just thinking of marshmallow sky and like the Ghostbusters thing and like the Doughboy thing, maybe there's a way to shift it instead of the marshmallow sky to like, anyways, that's like one option that comes to mind. And maybe of course you'd have to shift different words, but it gives this idea. Yes.
So, teaching definitely has changed along the way. But the things that I learned, he definitely instilled upon me the idea that you need to take yourself seriously if you're a poet. You have an obligation to yourself and the world, and that is to see and to report what you see. And I really love that, as a reporter does. You are a poet, so the things that you see need to be reported in a way that no one else has ever reported them. That is your assignment.
Yes, and that's why, rather than talking in just plain English, if you're a poem, it needs to be to kind of like, I like to say what can't be said. And to kind of see what we're afraid to see, maybe. I don't know.
Sure, see what we're afraid to see, but I think the idea and what I try to do is show it in a different way.
Yeah.
And even the simplest things, I have a poem here. It's a very simple poem.
Ooh.
But for me, it's the when I wrote this, I actually laughed, thinking, that's ridiculous. And it turned into be one of my favorite poems in this book. So this is from Sunbathing on Tyrone Power's grave.
Oh, well, now you have to read it. Yeah.
I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it.
Would you please bathe us away?
Well, it's another poem about nothing, but it's really about nothing. It's about a moment. It's about being in the moment. And I think it's almost an ode to poetry or to writing poetry. It's called In the Moment. I just parallel parked exactly right for the first time ever. Maybe because I wasn't imagining a tsunami killing me on Sunday in Laguna, or thinking about my mother alone at home, or when I dropped the puppy off the patio. She was fine. I never recovered. But today, windows down, no radio, just sky, steering wheel, and my hands were one. And backing into the space, feeling my tires hug the curb, was a clean slide into home. That rare fit of perfection was upon me. And let me say right now, I didn't waste it.
Snap, snap, snap. Clap, clap, clap. Round of applause.
I like that poem.
I like that. I love that so much. The tsunami part is what grabs you after the parallel part. First off, boom. I can relate. Like, I had that. Can you imagine, like, when the first time where it's like, like when it's almost like you were seeing, but you were blindfolded. It's like, I could parallel part. And it's like, yeah. And it's like, it didn't hit the side or scratch or whatever. Because that's tough. And then it's like this tsunami. So you have it, and that's a different way of expressing something completely when you didn't feel like this. And so you're expressing it in a unique way that tends to the poem.
There you go. And probably that was the hardest, that took the most time, because I did
tsunami line.
The tsunami, yeah, because I wanted to show, not being anxious and worrying about something ridiculous, which is what I do all the time.
And also a tsunami coming, maybe sometimes you might think that's not gonna happen. So Rick Lupert, who was on for an episode for season 1, had said we had actually recorded it and done it pre, everything shutting down and all that stuff. That was in around, like, I think it was like maybe in February last year, something, or early February. And then, oh shoot, what's going on? Okay, now what happens is, he had joked of saying there will be no more traffic in LA. Like, there will be you can just go on the 405. And he's like, yes, this will be in the future. And that happened. And we were joking, but it's now serious.
Yeah, no, I know. There's a lot of things like that. It's crazy. And Rick, Rick is he is exactly what we're talking about. He sees everything in a quirky, interesting way. I think a lot of poets, Brendan Constantine also,
I love Brendan. He's also an incredible artist.
He is. And as the world is turning, as things are happening, you're just clicking, you're just seeing them different. I think that's a lot of times with me, one event is going on and I'm seeing it as a poem, or I'm seeing it totally in a different way. And you kind of need to train yourself to do that in a way. It comes naturally for them. And I think it did for Lux. Although Tom Lux, going back to him, he worked much harder, I think, than a lot of poets. It wasn't, he would sit with a poem for months. This was no simple, he would not let a poem go until it,
like knuckles against the grindstone,
Yeah. I mean, I let a lot of my poems out probably way before they're ready.
I can do that too. And I find, like, there are poems that then come out in 5 minutes, and then there are poems in 30 minutes that maybe with some editing. And then there are ones that are not just because maybe they're like I can write long poems, tend to take longer for me, but there are poems then that, let's say, it takes entire months or something or more because of looking at different times to go back to it, as well as the line appears. That's the one that was missing, and reworking. And that's not just because, I was being lazy for the others. It required more.
Yeah, but I think, for me now, well, this has always been the case, but more so now, I will even when I think it's ready, I let it sit on my desktop. I have a folder called Poems in Play, and they all live in there.
I love
And
that.
then Poems in Play. And then in the morning, if I don't have a new idea I want to write out, I'll open Poems in Play and I'll just go eeny, meeny, miny, and I'll take one of them out. And they pop out on my desktop and I look at it, and maybe I thought it was finished 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and I go, oh my God. And it hits
What
me
was I
right away.
thinking?
The first line has got to go out, and the title as well, because I think that a poem is a living, breathing object, and it will change over time. It will tell you, oh God, get rid of that word in the middle here. Oh no, this is totally wrong. We should be in triplets. We
And you
shouldn't be in.
can't always see that immediately.
No, you don't. You will not always see that immediately. And anyone who does, I can't believe. I mean, I guess there are geniuses who they pop out and they're exactly right. But the poem needs to breathe, and it breathes by itself. I believe that. And it has all kinds of ideas of its own. And then when you revisit it, you're kind of in sync. Like, oh yeah, I know what you wanted. I once heard in one of my teachers, I don't remember, but I should know, but she said a poem will tell you how it wants to look on the page. When a poem comes to you, it will tell you, I'm going to be a block, or I'm going to be tercets. I need stanzas. It will tell you how it wants to appear. And I love that. And I think of that every time I write. And sometimes I'll say, no, you don't want to do this. You want to be couplets. And I'll break it up. But it doesn't want to be couplets.
I forgive me. I'm going to do this. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to say a few words because I hear a poem right now. So I'm going to I don't know. This poem needs to breathe. Faces in the mirror. Teeth, alabaster as America. This poem needs to breathe. Recorded on telephone wires. This poem needs to breathe. A mirror of freedom. This poem needs to breathe. That's so far what comes to mind. That's all that comes. But of a repeating line, this poem needs to breathe as a repeating line. But I had it. I'll say that later. But I apologize. You understand.
I want you to be sending me that poem so I can look at it.
Okay. I will send it for you to go line by line. So I wonder, do you have a piece about Tom? And then I'd like to go into the whole spiel. But do you have a poem about Tom?
Actually, I have two poems for him.
I feel that one I feel like would be good if you could pick one. Do eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
Well,
unless they're like one is shorter,
I'll read the first poem in this book, and I'll give you the background quickly. But I sent him my manuscript before they were published, and he was kind enough to comment. When I sent the manuscript for this book, he said, Kimmy, he said, much more serious. You write a lot about death in this book. There's a lot of poems about death, and and I was upset when he said that. I thought, wow, really? I didn't think I did that. So that night I went to sleep. I just read his email about it. I went to sleep and I had a dream about running over a bird. And I wrote this poem, which is dedicated to Thomas Lux. The first title is the first line. He said, I wrote about death. He said, I wrote about death, and I didn't mean to. This was not my intent. I meant to say how I loved the birds, how watching them lift off the branches, hearing their song, helps me get through the gray morning. When I wrote about how they crash into the small, dark places that only birds can fit through, layers of night sky, pipes through drains, how I've seen them splayed across gutters, piles of feathers stuck together by dried blood, how once my car ran over a sparrow. Though I swerved, the road was narrow, the bird not quick enough, dragged it under my tire as I drove to forget, bird disappearing part by part, beak, slender feet, fretful, hot. I did not want to write about death, but rather how when something dies, we remember who we love. And we die a little too, we who are still breathing, we who still have the energy to survive.
Oh, snap, 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 clap, clap, clap. Round of applause. And I'm sure, that's really beautiful that, that we have the energy to survive. And those last few lines just really just hit you with that emotion. And I'm sure that, he's gifting you with the energy to survive and keep on writing.
Yeah, he is. And thank
Yeah.
you. That was one of those poems that I really tried to channel him when I was writing it, because I wanted every word. I wanted the music and the rhyme, and I wanted him to love the poem. The amazing thing about this poem also is that I sent it into Poem a Day. This was several years
The
ago.
series, yes.
And
They took it.
They accepted it, and I was so thrilled. But the unbelievable thing is that the pub date they gave for the poem turned out to be the day after he died.
Wow. And they couldn't have known that because they're scheduling
No.
everything. So it just happened to be.
Yeah. So I got to say on the bottom that it was for him. And I mean,
Wow. That's just a way to honor. Wow.
Yeah. That was really something. So, poems have some special meaning that way. And anyway, so yeah. But there's one thing here for him that very few people I think would know. But when I had Get Me Through the Gray Morning, Tom loved to use gray. And I remember in a very early book of his called Memory's Hand Grenade that he wrote when he was in his 20s. He said, I can barely lift the gray aspirin to my lips. And I always would stick in the word gray now and again, just as homage to him. Even though Gray Morning isn't exactly brilliant, there's a lot of gray mornings.
I recently, the other day, I used gray in something to refer to rainbows, gray bones.
There you are. I mean, because gray is an interesting word that is not bleak, exciting color, and yet it can be exciting in a poem. And that's something interesting about words and poems, how they can transfer what they are in the right context or a different context. So
Right. So I wonder, would you gray with me in the rainbow of walking on eggshells filled with memory bomb blah bliss? And we can say yay and snap, 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 clap, 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 round of applause. And if you understand what I'm saying let's do that OTSCP on the spot collaborative poem. I told you it was going to be corny. Was it?
No, it wasn't corny. It was very confusing, Josh. I didn't know what you were talking about. But I love this thing that you do.
That's perfect.
So I just did what you asked me to do. I found 3 books and I opened them up to pages and I didn't look where I was. I picked 3 books that have for me.
Drum roll. Which books
2 of which
do you have out?
Okay, so I've one book I have out is Elizabeth Strout's My Name is Lucy Barton, which is one of my favorite books. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. I haven't read it for a few years and I don't know what pages I have here. The other book I have is a book I'm reading right now, which is just unbelievable, called Fierce Attachments by Vivian Gornick. It's a memoir, and she wrote it many years ago, but I was just, I adore it. I can't, I'm going to spend tomorrow finishing it. And then here's a blast from the past talking about Tom Lux, but here's my original copy of The Abortion by Richard Brautigan.
Oh, wow.
This is my original. Can you see this?
Yes, we saw it. Yeah,
this
beautiful.
Book was, I'm trying to find the price here because that is a mind blower. I think it's like $2.99 or something.
Oh, geez.
But
Louise.
This book is from 1970. So there you go. And I just opened it to a chapter.
So the pages for each.
Oh, okay. All right. So for The Abortion by Richard Brautigan, I have page 110 and 111. And for Vivian Gornick's book, Fierce Attachments, page 54 and 55. And then for Elizabeth Strout's My Name is Lucy Barton, page 44 and 45. Okay. I just opened them randomly, so I don't know if that's what you're
same here. Absolutely, that's perfect. You're amazing. Okay. So I have when the virus strikes, COVID-19 strikes America, edited by Thelma T. Rana, and I have it out to page 134 and 135, and I have that out too. So 134 is Birdwatching by Hazel Clayton Harrison, and then 4 Months is the title of on page 135 with Dawn Kingfisher Campbell. I have out I have out Sylvia Plath, Ariel and Other Poems, the restored edition, of course, and I have it out to pages 14 and 15, first 2 pages of Lady Lazarus. Then I have out The Mysticism of Sound and Music, the Sufi Teachings of Kazayat Inayat Khan by Kazayat Inayat Khan, and I have that out to pages 102 and 103. And lastly, I had Fahrenheit 451, which I'm currently reading. I'd never read it before. Can you imagine? On pages 134 and 135, and that's why.
All right. Okay.
So that's what I have out. Would you like to begin?
Okay, so just give me the rules again. Just jump from book to book, page to page, and yeah.
So it's wherever your eyes kind of gaze on words. So let's say I say disadvantage, and then I see hands, and then I see in the distance. So I say disadvantaged hands in the distance, and maybe that's then the end of maybe.
All right, I'm just going to bounce around,
and we'll go back and forth.
All right, I might do 3 words. All right, because I'm not.
However many.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. All right. Here we go. I might want to wear heels. Describe clothes. Roughneck bells, huh? Apartment. Sometimes screaming. 14 years old. I put the jacket back. Her color clearly did rise. Let him in. The bell rope. Frightened people. Goddamn queer down on Market Street.
Identical appreciation of music is not right rhythm. Responders, machine running. Good luck, I say, to Skin and Miracle. Nazi soul of Spears, An Accident, The Hunt.
This fantasy, being just a writer, I understood. Yeah, okay. Let's go. The library, bells, that's all, kid. Crying for help.
To last upliftment, to spiritual perfection amid whirring commercials.
You wearing your eternal t-shirt, buffalo heavy, legs crossed, windowsill, eloquent speeches, Nettie's lace.
music, octaves of a disturbed person, healing gentlemen, ladies, my hand, jaws of luck, a seashell smiling.
I owned a longer skirt, thought it was books, fiction. I didn't want to cause her embarrassment. Don't worry about it. That's all. That's all. Ringing the library door, little half sweater over the blouse.
These faults, easily disturbed. Health is a second. Fade, then move, dramatize, temperamental. The power of the peanut millions.
Magical isolation. I'll embarrass you. Drop into her lap. Mother lying. Couch. Bring me. Glass of water. Shut the window. Draft. Like you do something interesting. Actress?
Or perfection, mechanically imperfect, myself.
Seventh decade. It was Foster. Removed. Nettie. Just suppose. Immediate. Rescue. Even though I'm an epidemic, a revolution.
That's a great ending. Let's end it there. Well,
That was great.
thank you so much. Kim, thank you so much for joining us on Assiduous Dust. Of course, I'll type that up and give it to you. And if you know, as your party favorite, you want to include it in the anthology, we'll see. Anywho, thank you so much. Any last words, websites, shout outs?
Poetry is saving a lot of people during the lazy time. Writing it, reading it, seeing the world differently is much better than seeing the world the way it is, or seeing the world the way it is and writing about it. These are all great things right now for those of us who have the nightingale fever, and if you don't have it and want to have it, just look at something every day and take a little spin on it. Maybe you see it differently. Maybe you want to report on it. So keep a notebook in your pocket, or one of these handy iPhones, which has the memo. And I just now turn it on and dictate what I see if I don't have a pen and paper handy. So I just want to say that, and a shout out to poetry, and a big thank you to you for having me on your show, and all you do to keep creativity alive and well and exciting. And I think that is it.
Well, that's all, folks. Thank you so much again, Kim, and I look forward to our next groovy encounter.
Take care. Be well.